Good evening. I'd like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, January 7th, 2020. The Portland Board of Public Education is meeting in Casco Bay High School in the Great Space. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Atkinson?
Here.
Mr. Balfons?
Here.
Ms. Bondo?
Présent.
Mr. Burke?
Here.
Ms. Figdor?
Here.
Ms. Morioni? Ms. Thompson? Ms. Trevorrow? Ms. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Casiel Reyes?
Here.
Ms. Habibatsai?
Here.
Mr. Parrott? Ms. Yangala?
I'm here, present.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Presente. And just a quick note, Ms. Trevorrow and Ms. Thompson did tell me ahead of time they wouldn't be able to join us. Both of them are a little bit under the weather. And Ms. Morioni had a conflict in her in her appointment, so she won't be joining us either. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the report of the chair, I just want to take a brief moment to welcome everyone back after our winter break or after our December break. I hope everyone had a restful time and enjoyed it. And I also want to wish everyone a very happy new year. I'm going to keep my comments very brief tonight because we do have a somewhat busy agenda, and I don't want to keep people here later than we should. But I wanted to I guess just say that during the December break, a lot of us experience some of the happiest times of the year, but we also recognize that it could be a very stressful time of the year for some families. And there's a lot of awareness that we need to bring up so that we don't add to that stress as we welcome these students back into our school and back into a routine. So keeping that in mind, we want to make sure that we enter this mid part of the year and we go into the rest of the school year trying to do everything that we can to support all of our students. And here on the board, on our role, which is obviously not part of the day-to-day school environment, we want to be as helpful as possible to all of our staff, families, and certainly to our students. So the board is committed to the work of this district and supporting our families and our students. And I think tonight, later on, when we get into the board focus on educational issues, we'll be dealing with some of the issues that I think we're going to be instrumental in supporting the district's work. So again, I just wanted to once again wish everyone a very happy new year and try to keep us as positive as possible as we continue our work this school year. Having said that, we're going to start with the student report. This will be the first report from the new class of student representatives on our board. So we have Ms. Stephanie Brown presenting for Portland High School. You have the floor, Ms. Brown.
Returning to school from our winter break last Thursday, Portland High is getting ready for a busy time of year. Winter activities are in full swing, and the boys hockey team, which is a cooperative team with Deering, took home the City Cup title in the game against Cheverus this past Saturday. This weekend, our musical theater class will be performing South Pacific on Saturday at 7:30 and Sunday at 2:30. Our school-wide Poetry Out Loud competition will be held next week. All students are encouraged to participate by reciting poems. Also approaching next week are our midterm assessments, which will wrap up the first semester and mark the midway point for our school year. Tomorrow night at 6:30 is our 8th grade open house, where all 8th graders and their families are welcome to come tour the school and hear about the academic and extracurricular programs we have to offer. High school choice decisions will continue into the month, with all 3 middle schools visiting Portland High on January 24th, 27th, and 28th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Next, excuse me, report of the superintendent, Mr. Botana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to begin my comments today by recognizing the Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki, or people of the Dawnland, the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand. We're honored to have their children among our students in our schools today. Today, we begin by recognizing the Deering High School debate team. This has been a long time coming, guys. We've had cancellations, mix-ups, all sorts of stuff, so I am so glad that we're finally getting to this. They're here today led by team coach and Deering mathematics teacher Brian Dodge. The Deering High School debate team is not a stranger to recognition by this board for their success. This team has distinguished itself in tournament after tournament, including taking home 3 individual state championships over the past 6 years and competing at the national level last year. Come on up, guys, so that everybody can see you. This year, they continued their successful run with wins at the Maine Forensic Association event on Saturday, November 23rd. Deering teams including one with seniors Glynis O'Meara and Aiden Reed, another with junior Aiden Bloom Levine and sophomore Lynn Nguyen, and a team of sophomores with Balkis Mohammed and Emily Chung competed in the public forum category and took home trophies for first, third, and fourth respectively, and second place overall for the tournament. The team also swept the Falmouth Speech and Debate Tournament just 2 weeks earlier on November 9th. The Deering team competed in public forum and Lincoln Douglas style debate, and in that competition, the teams of Glynis O'Meara and Aiden Reed, Aiden Bloom Levine and Lynn Nguyen, and Balkis Mohammed and Emily Chung finished first, second, and third, respectively. Joining us today are Lynn, Aiden Reed, Aiden Bloom Levine, Balkis, Emily, and Coach Dodge. Congratulations to the Deering School Debate Team for continuing its exemplary run of victories and making us all proud. Congratulations.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Aiden, Balkis, Emily, and Aiden. Congratulations.
Great job.
Good job.
Thank you.
Okay. As reported at our last board meeting, our request for a waiver of construction procurement requirements was denied by the state. Since then, we've met with the District Advisory Building Committee and discussed our options. And among the things that we agreed with them is to schedule a workshop in the coming weeks to discuss our direction with the Portland City Council. We discussed several options for how we would go about doing our work and are prepared to make a recommendation to the board. Yesterday, Executive Director for Budget and Finance Miranda Fasulu and I met with Maine Department of Education Commissioner Pender Macon, her finance staff, and others to develop an understanding of the challenges we face as a result of our forecasted EPS funding reductions. The meeting was arranged as a result of Board Finance Chair Anna Trevaro's outreach with Governor Mills' office, and while there is no specific change that will result from this meeting, I believe it's helpful to continue to build policymakers' understanding of the challenges we face in this community as our efforts to sustain quality schools run up against the fact that by state law, we're limited to state funding, federal grants, and local property taxes as our only revenue sources. And while state and federal sources dwindle, that means more and more reliance on local property taxes. We're also working with the state to get a waiver of licensure requirements for our pre-K after-school pilot program. Because the process has been extended, we put on hold our implementation of an aftercare pilot program until a later date. I do want to inform you that we're not batting zero in the request for requests from state government category. We did request and we received an extension on our audit from the DOE. 1 for 3 in baseball's not a bad thing.
In baseball.
In baseball. The Foundation for Portland Public Schools Food Fuels Learning Fund granted its first ever school-based awards. Congratulations to Riverton Elementary School, King Middle School, Casco Bay High School for their successful applications. Thank you to the foundation and to our partners at Food Fuels Learning for their fundraising, outreach, and thoughtful collaboration on making the award decisions. I want to invite board members and everyone in the community to our upcoming Parent University on January 16th at King Middle School Auditorium from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. This presentation will focus on understanding the college application process, and it's designed to assist high school students and their parents and guardians to understand and plan for the different college options after high school. Our high school guidance counselors will discuss the college application process, access to financial aid resources, and other steps towards a successful application. As someone who just went through this recently, I can tell you that even as an educator and someone who is better plugged in than most, that it was a daunting and frustrating process, and anyone who has a middle school or high school student should be taking advantage of this opportunity. Finally, tonight I'm prepared to report out on my recommendation to rename a Portland public school to honor a Maine civil rights icon, community leader, and the first African-American elected to the Maine legislature. As most of you know, in February of last year, the City Council wrote to this board asking that you consider renaming one of our schools in honor of Gerald Talbot. In May, the board approved a resolution that stated, quote, that the Portland Board of Public Education charges the board chair with working with the superintendent to design and implement a process that does not include the solicitation of additional names, but that is otherwise consistent with board policy FF, naming facilities. That includes a review of existing facilities that could be renamed and a process for community engagement and dialogue on the potential naming, end quote. Today, after consultation with the board chair, I'm recommending that you consider renaming the Riverton Elementary School in Mr. Talbot's honor. In making this recommendation, I've taken into account our existing policy, Policy FF, on renaming schools, the extent to which school's current name has a special significance, the length of time and the process that was followed in arriving at the current name, the connection of the school to Mr. Talbot, the disposition of school leaders around the renaming, and the likelihood that the renaming would add value to each specific school's work. The resolution required that I outline for the board on the process, that I provide an outline for the board on the process for moving forward with this recommendation. To that end, I'm proposing that we have a first reading of a resolution to rename the school at the next board meeting on January 21st. And that we hold a workshop on that topic at that same meeting. Then the board would hold a public hearing about the renaming as part of the second reading and the vote on February 4th. So I look forward to going deeper into my recommendation, the reasons why I opted for Riverton, and the criteria that I used at our workshop on January 21st. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next, for report of the Secretary, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of December 10, 2019. Is there a motion? Ms. Figdor, second by Mr. Atkinson. Is there any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of the meeting of December 10th, 2019, please indicate. That's unanimous with the students voting in favor as well. Just a quick note, there are no minutes for the December 17th meeting. That meeting was canceled. Superintendent and I just should share this as part of the remarks of the chair. Superintendent and I, when we were planning the agendas, we didn't see that there was an immediate need to make up that meeting, so we didn't add an additional one. And so we've now continued on with this schedule. So that's why we didn't cram your January with a third meeting. Having said that, moving on to consent items, will the superintendent please read the list of donations made to the district?
Yes, but before I do that, I do want to mention that just before the winter break, I previewed for you a couple of gifts to support our students' college aspirations. At last month's Casco Bay High School March to the Post Office, the school announced that the Thompson family, who are the grandparents of Casco Bay graduate and current French teacher Kyra Dorvey, left $800,000 to support scholarships for Casco Bay graduates admitted to Dartmouth undergraduate programs or Dartmouth Medical School. They also left another gift of about $20,000 a year to support scholarships at Portland High School. We're still working through the details on the latter. I'm always humbled and grateful for the enduring commitments of our community to the work of Portland Public Schools, and this is another wonderful example of how Portland Public Schools has made a mark in the lives of people in this community and how they're paying it forward to future generations. Under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district, and as required by that policy, all the donations are listed in the board agenda under this item. Our practice is for each donor to receive a written contribution, acknowledging and expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. And I would like to thank the many generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance. So today's gifts, the district science department received a donation of science equipment and furniture from D.C. Baxter Woods 2 LLC of Portland, Maine. Lyseth Elementary School received books for the Rotary Lyseth Reading Program from the Rotary Club of Portland. The district office received an HTT 2300 plotter from Jason Passanier of Augusta. I must admit that I did not read this before, and I have no idea what the HTT 2300 plotter is. Lincoln Middle School received a donation to go toward the needs of the school from Eric Sokol and Jessica Townsend of Portland. Riverton Elementary School received the following donations: women's clothing for the School Resource Center from Yvette Nadeau of Portland, clothing and household items from the School Resource Fair from Lindsay Jendrasko of Portland, 40 pair of hand-knit mittens from Joan Steinberg of Portland. East End Community School received the following donations: clothing for the clothing closet from Jennifer Michelot of Portland, Delane Brown and Christopher Sewell of Portland, and the Everson family of Portland. Pizza from Horace Mann of Falmouth, and free massages from Chiropractic and Sports Health of Portland. And Paths received the following donations: a 2005 Hyundai Sonata from POC Collision of Saco, a 2003 Honda Civic sedan from Frederick Rotzi of Portland, a 2004 Cat 3406 diesel engine from Lucas Snow of Sprucehead, and a Quick Log guitar stand, Hamilton guitar stand, on-state amplifier stand, 4 microphone stands, and a camera tripod from Joanne Dow of Portland. And we are very grateful to all of these wonderful people for their contributions to the Portland Public Schools.
Thank you, Superintendent. A very healthy list. We had a last meeting, if you recall, we didn't have anything to announce. I couldn't help myself. I Googled it. A plotter is a computer hardware device, much like a printer, that is used for printing vector graphics instead of toner. Plotters use pen, pencil, marker, or other writing tools to draw multiple continuous lines onto paper rather than a series of dots like a traditional printer.
Interesting. I love these board meetings because you learn so much.
But I almost wanted to Google what a 2004 Cat 3406 looks like, but
Just didn't have that.
I think one Google per meeting is enough. All right, so real quick, for those of you that are following our agenda, we're going to take an item out of order. We have a handful of people from the community that we're going to assign, or that we're going to consider assigning for membership of the building level advisory committees. And just out of respect for their time, so that they don't have to sit through a lengthy meeting, we're going to move that up to this moment. And I've already kind of ran it by everyone, and no one objected to it. So having said that, consideration and action to appoint a community and at-large members to the building level advisory committees, BLAC, for Longfellow and Penobscot Elementary Schools. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, second by Ms. Figdor. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
Yes. Under the governance charter of the building level under the governance charter for the building level advisory committees, each school under construction will have a building level advisory committee that will consist of up to 16 members, which includes the co-chairs, which are appointed by the board chair, an at-large board member or a board member from one of the districts sending students to the school, an at-large city councilor or a city councilor from one of the districts sending students to the schools. Additionally, each BLAC will include the school principal or assistant principal, 3 staff members, which are appointed by the superintendent, a minimum of 7 members of the public who reside in the school's attendance area, and up to 3 additional at-large members of the public. Recently, back in December, the board made appointments for community and at-large representatives for Reiki, so the full slate, as well as partial community appointments for Longfellow and Presumpscot. Because we were not able to complete the slates for Longfellow and Presumpscot, staff reopened the application process and did specific outreach to residents. In early December, the appointments committee met to review the applicants for open positions, and in your agenda, you see the attached list, which includes the appointments committee recommendations, which will complete the BLACs for both Longfellow and for Presumpscot. The list includes for Longfellow 5 prospective community members, all residing within the Longfellow attendance area, and this brings the total BLAC community membership for Longfellow to 9. And for Presumpscot, an additional 4 prospective community members, 3 from within the Presumpscot attendance area and 1 at large, and this would bring the total BLAC community membership to 8. Let me quickly just read through the names of the individuals that we're asking you to appoint today. You have that in your packet, but I just want to do this for the record. And also, I know at least 2 of them are here, so if you would stand up and, I don't know if you want to make any comments or anything, but at least stand up so that folks know who you are. We're appointing Joe Carter to the Longfellow BLAC, and Luke Truman also to the Longfellow BLAC. And those are the only 2 that I know are here, but if there are others, as I read your name, please stand up. So we also have Elizabeth LaPierre, and she is being appointed, or we're asking that she be appointed to the Presumpscot BLAC. Former board member Lori Davis has agreed to serve on the Longfellow BLAC, and Ms. Davis was not able to be here tonight. She had emailed several of us to let us know that because of a family commitment, she was not able to be here today. Ann Hardcastle, also requesting appointment to the Longfellow BLAC. Bill Dodson is requesting appointment to the Longfellow BLAC. Sarah McMath, appointment to the Presumpscot BLAC. Laura Fries to the Presumpscot BLAC, and Lita Semro to the Presumpscot BLAC. All of these folks have been contacted and they've agreed to serve. They were vetted by the appointments committee, and those are our recommendations for you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? If either of you wanted to say anything, you feel more comfortable coming up to the podium. You don't have to, of course, but.
If I should speak in the microphone.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for considering me, and I look forward to serving the greater good, I suppose, and doing anything and everything I can, and hope that I know that you saw the application, but that my experience is useful. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Joe.
Hello, I'm Joe Cotter, and I thank you again also for the appointment. I served on the Roe school building committee and thoroughly enjoyed it. Excuse me. And so I look forward to continuing that work at Longfellow, where I have family members who attend that elementary school. So thank you again.
Thank you. If there's no more public comment, we'll close the floor. And is there any board discussion? Mr. Atkinson, Ms. Victor?
I just want to say thank you especially to the community members who are here tonight, but to everybody who's stepping up and taking a part in the reconstruction of these two and the 3 elementary schools that remain in the group. This is not an insignificant amount of work, and it's certainly very significant for our district. So thank you very much for stepping up and volunteering to take on this work.
Thank you, Tim. Ms. Victor?
Thank you. I also want to thank all the community members who are going to serve on these committees. It is it's so important that the community voices are heard as part of the renovation of all 4 of our elementary schools. I do want to raise a concern that I don't believe that these 4 committees, the 4 BLAC committees, represent the diversity of our schools, and I think we have a lot more work to do in terms of outreach to the community, as well as making the process more of applying to serve on our community committees more accessible to a broader swath of our families and the community at large. I heard several concerns from folks in the Presumpscot community, in particular, that the application process was really too difficult for some to see through. So I really encourage us to continue to work to make our committees more reflective of our student population.
Thank you, Ms. Victor. Any other board discussion? Seeing none, I'll also extend a big thank you to community members who applied and are willing to take on this responsibility. It was very much intentional for the board that we include community voices, not just from the school communities, but from the city at large into this work. And we've tried to be as transparent with what we're trying to achieve as possible. And having your voices there and having your input there is certainly a very important part of what we're trying to achieve. So again, thank you very much for that. Having said that, all those in favor of appointing community and at-large members to the building level advisory committees, BLAC, for Longfellow and Presumpscot Elementary Schools, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting in favor. Thank
Do you want to do the other one, which is the consideration and action to appoint board and council members to serve as co-chair?
Will do. They beat me to it. I was gonna say that even though we're taking this out of order, you guys are more than welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting. So the reason I'm half joking saying that we're gonna actually have some presentations that if you're interested in our schools, and clearly you are because of what you're volunteering to do, what we're about to discuss is equally important, particularly to what goes on in the day-to-day work in our buildings. But before that, we're gonna take the other item related to the building level advisory committees out of order. So consideration and action to.
You know what, we don't have to, we can take that later.
But now you put me halfway through. Now I have to.
My bad. Do whatever you want to do.
I'm gonna go ahead and take it just because it makes sense and we're in that topic, and it'll open up the rest of the evening for. Consideration and action to approve to appoint board and council members to serve as co-chairs of the building level advisory committees for Longfellow, Presumpscot, and Reiki. Is there a motion? Mr. Balfan, second by Mr. Atkinson. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
Yes, tonight we're also asking you to act on the co-chair appointments for the Longfellow, Presumpscot, and Reiki BLACs as follows. For Longfellow, the board member is Ms. Marnie Morioni. Counselor is this is incorrect, is Mr. Mavadonis. For Presumpscot, it is Chair Rodriguez and Councilor Ali, and for Reiki, it is Ms. Figdor and Councilor Spencer Thibodeau.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, we'll close the floor. Any board discussion? Seeing none, I'll thank the counselors, of course, and the board members who have volunteered to take this on. We already have pretty full agendas, not just with the business meetings, but our committee meetings. We have pretty full plates in those committees. So taking this on is just additional burden to us. But I think that, like I said before, this is work that the board is very much committed to doing and being as engaged in it as possible. So thank you for everyone who stepped up. I question, however, who decided to put Councilor Ali and I together once again. We'll do our work, though. Thank you. All those in favor of appointing board, all those in favor of appointing board and council members to serve as co-chairs of the building level advisory committees for Longfellow, Presumpscot, and Reiki, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting in favor. All right, we're back to regularly scheduled agenda item, board focus on educational issues. We have two presentations tonight. First one, we'll be discussing the expanding learning time for students who need it, summer school summary, and looking forward. Superintendent, do you want to set us up for this?
Yep. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we have two board focus sessions tonight. Generally, we try not to do that. Board focus is designed to allow the board to go deep into some of the school district's most important work in a more relaxed and thoughtful manner than when dealing with an action item or hearing it during my report. Tonight's doubling up is the result of our second December meeting having been canceled, as Chair Rodriguez mentioned earlier, due to the inclement weather. We have many upcoming agenda items that will continue to take up significant time, so we decided to move ahead with these two board focus items at this meeting. So I do ask your indulgence as we take on these two very important topics. We've been using the board focus sessions this fall to highlight the implementation of our key initiatives, investments and initiatives. Recall that our last two board focus sessions have been on our pre-K expansion and our behavioral health continuum. Tonight's first board focus session is the next in that series of presentations. Our focus today is on our summer school programming. One of the strategies articulated in the Portland Promise is providing extended learning opportunities for our students, particularly those who need extra time and opportunities to master challenging content. The research on the importance of out-of-school time to lessen opportunity gaps for students goes back to the 1950s. Today, Assistant Superintendent Malia Nally, Carlos Gomez, Director of English Language and World Languages, Ben Donaldson, Principal at Moore Middle School, and Molly Myers, our Summer School Coordinator. Did I get everybody?
Gail. Gail, the most important. No offense to the
Gail.
rest of you.
And it's in my notes, and Director of Intervention, Gail Cressy. Well, I was so excited to see Molly that I just stopped reading. It was just, Molly's here. We'll share some of the work that we've been doing to make our summer school supports more strategic. They will share details about our programming, the theoretical basis for this work, and our outcomes. They will also provide insights into what we would like to be able to do to continue and expand. Before I turn this over to Malia, I do want to point out that Gail Cressy has just recently completed a year-long fellowship sponsored by the John T. Gorman Foundation focused on results-based accountability. Gail has been a longtime leader in the district, and we're thrilled that she's committed to her own continued development as a thoughtful and impactful leader, and she brought a ton of what she learned during that fellowship into the summer school work and into this presentation. So with that, I did not forget Gail Cressy, and I'm going to turn it it over to Assistant Superintendent Nally to tee up tonight's presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you guys want to, open that up?
You guys want to? I'm doing stumbling over myself today.
Yep, thanks. Okay, so, sorry, is that? Okay, great. All right, so the superintendent, I think, teed up our purpose this evening quite well, but just to reiterate, our goals are to make sure you're oriented to how summer learning fits within our overarching Portland Promise strategy. We're going to go through the scope of work, both in terms of the reach and what we do, and talk a little bit about the impact and the results that we saw. And then we want to start to preview the funding context for the upcoming budgets, because there's a few moving pieces there that are important for you all to understand. And of course, we'll leave time at the end to answer questions. So the superintendent already introduced the team that's here to present to you all tonight. And I would also just add that Matt Dubell from Connect Ed is here and able to answer questions during the Q&A period if folks are interested in some of the community partnership work as well. So the summer learning work is aligned to both our achievement and our equity goals. Again, Superintendent Botana mentioned that we have an explicit strategy. This falls under the achievement goal within the Portland Promise Plan that names we're focused on developing a district-wide intervention strategy with a focus on extending learning time for students who need it. And so one of the obvious ways and places where we can extend the time is extending the year and moving into the summer. And so that's how we think of summer learning in relationship to our strategy and our goals in the Portland Promise. In addition to that, summer learning is aligned to our first two learning beliefs. I have learning belief 2 up here, but as a reminder, our first learning belief is that all students can rise to high expectations, and that follows with the second belief that all learners have different strengths, needs, and starting points based on who they are and what they've experienced, and so they learn in different ways and time frames. And so to the point about summer learning, this gives different opportunities for students to interact with the material and also gives them more time if they need it. And then finally, I also wanted to situate this in the context of the BAR work. We reviewed this before the new year. This was the research project and the data project we did with BAR. Focused on post-secondary success outcomes. Coming out of that, we have 4 key priorities, one of which is focused on rigor and high expectations. And specifically, both the quantitative and qualitative data led us to this kind of assertion that we want to focus on ensuring all students have access to rigorous coursework by increasing support, not by lowering standards. And so again, summer learning is part of that increased support in order to help all students rise to and meet high expectations. So with all that kind of contextualization, our kind of specific vision for summer learning is to make sure we're giving students additional opportunities to meet grade level standards. So this is also clearly connected to our proficiency approach. We're hoping to maintain and grow skills. Obviously, it's not as much time as we have in the academic year, but at the very least, we are looking to help students maintain their growth and optimally grow beyond that as well. And then finally, we think of this as making sure all the students in our district have a rich and meaningful summer experience. And so in that way, we also think of it as aligned to our whole student goal. There's quite a bit of research that supports summer learning. So this is just a few snippets from the research. And we pulled out a few points that connect to what I just shared and what we're about to talk more about. So I think the first is really connected to the equity focus for us here, and that's that many disadvantaged students start the year with lower achievement levels than where they ended the prior year. So many of you have probably heard about this, heard the term summer slide, and so summer school is intended to help prevent that summer slide. The second piece we pulled out is connected to just the quality and the approach. And so we think about blending academic learning with hands-on experiences, and that hits that third kind of vision point I made on the summer learning experience. High-quality programs in the summer lean on professional staff and professional teachers and educators. And then there's an emphasis on the integration of community partnerships that comes out in the research as being higher quality, and certainly that's part of the strategy you're going to hear more about. I think another couple points that we can circle back to, this point on attendance, Gail later on is going to talk about results and impact. And so it's very important that students are, of course, attending more consistently. So in a moment, she'll speak to how we look at that and the results that we're getting. I think we have pretty good outcomes in terms of our students coming consistently during the summer on a relative basis. And then finally, some of the research speaks to these summer reading programs, which is one of the programs we do. These are not necessarily the solution for all students, but they can be less costly, and they have some pretty great results, and you'll see that in a moment. That's true for us as well. So I'm going to introduce Gail now, and she's going to step you through more of just the reach and the impact, and then we have folks that are going to give you little stories and anecdotes about how the work looks in action.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to do a little overview of the programming itself, sort of the scope, some of the gaps, and then the results before we get sort of a deeper look into some of the programs. So this first slide, for those of you that aren't familiar with the scope of our summer program, is really meant to give you a sense of that in a couple of different areas. And so we feel like we have a pretty robust system of summer programming. It does range pre-K to 12. It's across multiple sites, so 12 locations around the city, our schools, and really has 50 sort of individual programs. We serve over 1,300 students, which is about 20% of the population, a bit higher percentage at the elementary, which really highlights our early intervention strategy. And part of that is accomplished in conjunction with community partners. We track, in particular, 3 of our community programs offered through LearningWorks, Mayo Street, and Boys and Girls Club, because they have a intentional literacy focus to the programs that they offer. We provide transportation and breakfast and lunch to all students involved in Portland Public Schools programming. And we try to employ as many of our own staff as possible, which speaks to that, the research around using professional staff. I also highlighted the number of Teach Portland interns, which is that Grow Your Own program, a pipeline to education done in partnership with USM. So we're proud of all that we accomplish. It's definitely a team approach to summer. It takes all of the operations departments and the central office functions like finance and payroll and HR, along with all of our building leaders to make this happen. But there's still gaps that exist. And so this is a picture in blue of the number of students served, sort of by grade span. And then the red would be the rest of the population. And so you can see where it hovers around 20-25% for each of the grade spans. And when you layer that with what you know about our free and reduced lunch rate or our proficiency rate, which certainly there's more than 20% of our students who need to still work towards their standards, that there is a gap, particularly at the middle school level, where you see that blue bar being the smallest. What's not highlighted here is that transition from 5th to 6th grade really is the biggest gap that we have. And then, the pre-K, just entering kindergarten program, serves a smaller portion of the number of kids that we then have in K. And this is sort of a spotlight on the gap by elementary school. We did a deeper dive in conjunction with ConnectEd and Matt around where programming exists across the city and how does that compare to students who are economically disadvantaged. So the blue bars are the students served by Portland Public Schools programming. The green and yellow are community program options. The yellow is actually a double dose for kids between the 2 types of programs. And then the red would indicate the approximate number of students who are of low socioeconomic status that didn't have access to summer programming last summer. So you can see that it's it's a significant number, and it varies by location. And a partial explanation is that the majority of this funding has been supported by federal funds through Title I, and those schools receive varying amounts of money, and some schools really need to prioritize school year programming versus summer programming. As I mentioned, we really couldn't do this without our community partners. We do receive one of the major partners in that green community partner bar is LearningWorks. They serve a significant number of students in Portland Public Schools and the elementary schools through a 21st Century Learning Grant and really manage that program. And we also, as I mentioned, partner with Mayo Street and Boys and Girls Club for academic programming. In addition to sort of seats during the summer, partners also provide funding. Starting Strong and Unum has funded us for summer programming through private grants. And then the other partners listed really offer services for us. An example of which is the Children's Museum has partnered for free with us for our Summer in the City program, which you'll hear more about, to bring in their modules of programming free during the summer for the students in that program. The next two slides are, again, intended to give you an idea of the scope and the number of programs that we offer and what they try to accomplish. And we have a couple of strategies there, as we mentioned, sort of achievement of standards and proficiency, but then also targeting some specific needs. So we have everything from that early K program I mentioned, which is meant to jumpstart foundational literacy skills, to literacy tutoring, to STEM-based programs, a math camp. We have this Summer in the City program directly targeted for students experiencing homelessness that haven't been able to access other programs. And then, as Malia mentioned in the overview, we do have started this sort of read-at-home program with research out of Harvard to look at sort of a lower-cost alternative by mailing books home to families and focusing on family engagement. At the middle school and high school level, we really see two major focus areas. One is sort of achievement of standards and completing that pathway towards graduation, and then also a focus on improving language skills through our middle school and high school language academies, and you'll hear more about that. So we're going to take a moment to highlight a few of the programs that we offered this summer and to highlight our two major approaches. One is that standards-based approach that we talked about, where we're giving additional time in the summer to target students and specific standards that they may not have met during the school year. So you'll hear from Ben Donaldson about the more middle school extension program, and you'll hear from Molly about our 8-9 transition freshman connection program. And then to highlight some of those targeted needs programs, we're really going to focus on the language-based programs. And so you'll hear about the middle school and high school language academy from Carlos Gomez, and then I'll speak to that Summer in the City program. And so I will turn it over to Ben Donaldson.
Great. Thank you, Gail. Molly helped too, if you want to come up. So we tried a little bit different approach this past spring to summer learning after a couple years of putting a lot of our eggs in the really innovative and fun and engaging basket for some summer learning in July. What we endeavored to do last spring was to get a real laser focus on who the kids were who were not yet meeting academic standards, and to really design an intervention for those students so that they would have additional opportunities to meet or exceed those standards. So really clear emphasis on, we know what 6th and 7th graders need to be able to do by the ends of those years, and we have better and better information about what they're missing. And when Gail talked about nearly 40% of our kids who are not yet proficient, let's get a really clear look at who those students are and what they need, and then design a program specifically for those kids. So that's what we did. We got a really clear look at it in April. And by identifying early, we were able to say to kids and to families, hey, look, you're not yet where you need to be, and so we're recommending you for this summer opportunity, which is going to be immediately after the school year ends. So it's not going to be in July. You're not going to have to plan into August. We're just going to invite you to be here for a little bit of time for math 1 week, a little bit of time for literacy another week, if you need those specific skills. And that was actually the best thing we did, was invited people early, because by knowing, a lot of kids and families were able to say, okay, what can we do now? You know, between now and the end of the school year, can we work to meet these standards? And we saw not a huge portion of kids, but probably 20% of the kids we invited were able to show progress in the end of the school year and meet standards. So that was the first success. Second success was really having this programming within our building right at the end of the school year. So it really was a continuation of the school year. And kids weren't pumped about that, but they played along, and they came back for 4 days if they needed all 4 days. If they only needed 2 days, they came for 2 days. And that was another key move, just to say, you're not here just to be here for a certain amount of time. You're here to show that you've made progress and that you now have these skills that you need. And so we think next year, or this coming summer, we'll take that even to another level to customize it more for kids. So within the program, they were there and they were working largely with their teachers, which was really helpful. In our building, in a familiar space, so kids who needed a little bit of extra time, a little bit of coaching, maybe some work with some other students, had opportunities to do that. So our math program was particularly successful. That was the first week of the summer. The second week of the summer, we did our literacy, and that was kids who needed just that literacy support. It was harder to get kids to come back after a week of summer vacation. But we did pretty well there, and we got good results. Then the next question that Gail pushed us on is, when we come back to school, we saw really good results within the program. Did we see it carry over to this fall? And I wish I could tell you all those kids met standards trimester 1. They didn't, but a higher percentage met trimester 1 than met last spring. So we're showing kind of that steady growth, and we've got almost half our kids who aren't yet proficient, and so we're picking some of those students up and helping them get to where they need to be through very specific goals, maintaining those high expectations, and saying to kids, you can do it, and we're going to be here to help you do it. So it's really a partnership with kids and families. And we think we can take it to the next level this summer. So that's for 6th and 7th graders. 8th graders, we passed on to Molly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Myers. This was a pilot program in many ways. It's the first time we've offered it, and it has a special place in my heart because it focuses on a moment, a critical but overlooked moment in a student's educational experience, which is a transition from 8th to 9th grade. And I was a former 9th grade teacher and a current 8th grade teacher. This is a pretty critical moment. And research has shown that school transitions have widened learning gaps, but I don't think it has to be that case. Transitions are at their core sort of fragile opportunities. And this program in particular sort of tried to seize that opportunity by creating standards-aligned math instruction and targeted tutoring alongside developing social, emotional, and executive function skills so that students could arrive to their 9th grade class feeling more efficacious. And I think that's where these kinds of programs, these transition programs, have their greatest effect, is that, I think the motivation for a student is not to necessarily learn standards that they didn't learn. It's to feel a sense of belonging in their next class. And if they have this opportunity to move to another school and have this maybe reinvent themselves in an academic community, it would be feeling a sense of belonging right away and feeling like they belong there as academically as well. And so I think this program or any transition program like it has a great opportunity to help them do that. So I fundamentally believe in it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here to talk a little bit about our Language Academy. And just so that you know, we had just under 100 students in both the middle school and the high school program collectively altogether in 2 separate programs. This included students who were recently arrived at the time that came to us at the end of June, beginning of the summer. Some of the students had a lot of education, prior education. Some had little prior education, and some had interrupted schooling. What they did have in common was a real excitement about being in school. And in my whole career of teaching, I've never heard a louder groan when I announced that it was the last week of the summer school. And they were just, no, we want more, más. I want to share a couple of highlights from the programming, and in the process give a shout out to some of our partners, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Maine Audubon, as well as the Center for Grieving Children, have been very wonderful partners over the last few years with the Language Academy. We had a curriculum unifying theme of indigenous/native species, and this was really an opportunity for our students to learn about their new home, right, Southern Maine. This involved nature walks, so we went to some visits out to Ludlow Pond, to the Deering Woods, to the Rachel Carson Reserve. And it led to some really memorable and vocabulary-rich walks around about flora and fauna. So, this helped us prepare students for some of the technical and academic language that they would see, say, in their science classes or in their middle school, high school classes, and also helped us build their basic conversational skills in English while really emphasizing the beauty of their native language and holding on to the languages that they already spoke. So one particular walk pictured here was in Rachel Carson Preserve, and we came upon a woodpecker in the middle of the woods doing its work, and it led to a really rich conversation about how do you say woodpecker in all the different languages that are there? And we learned, well, some actually aren't just woodpeckers, they're carpenter birds. So they actually do some serious work in the forest. And then that led to some conversations around hummingbirds. So, wow, okay, so in the US or in English, hummingbirds hum. Well, in other languages, they kiss flowers, or they pick flowers. So it was some very memorable conversations for the adults and the students that participated. In the end, what the students walked away with really to that whole student goal that was part of this, they reached on a daily basis. They were able to connect with themselves, with their friends, with each other. On a weekly basis, they connected with nature, they connected with their new home. And really after their long journeys of immigration, the bonds that they have with each other, the caring teachers and adults that they met, and sort of the friendly environments of Portland schools, I think gave them the confidence to move forward into their school year, knowing that they were part of something bigger, and that their languages and their cultures were appreciated, and also an expansion of their English language. So it has been very rewarding summers with the Language Academy students. So, by the way, there's some glasses if anyone. They're prop. Thank you.
I might need those. So some of the same goals, intent and goals exist with this Summer in the City program, which is an elementary-based program that we started 3 years ago, intended at that time for students that were housed at the family shelter and wouldn't have had an opportunity to be enrolled in a school-based program. We suspected there were kids we were missing because of our enrollment procedures and deadlines. So in our first year, we served up to about 25 students, and that's sort of a rolling enrollment. And we served it on site right at the shelter so that it had that sort of drop-in effect, and so to eliminate as many barriers as possible. So fast forward a couple of years to this past summer, and the enrollment for the summer's program tripled to about 75 because we made those adjustments, certainly at the urging of the superintendent and all of our staff to accommodate those students and families that had arrived at the expo in the summer. And so we were able to expand staffing in that program and offer a similar experience that Carlos talked about for older students, with the goals of acclimating to a new environment, acclimating to school routines and structures, developing relationships with adults, and visiting the city to learn language and enhance the heritage language, and also bring programming in with that sort of experiential science basis through our partnership with the Children's Museum. So the Children's Museum brought in their units on lakes and animal adaptations, and worked hand in hand with the staff at the Summer in the City program to help support students' language and literacy acquisition during those 5 weeks in the summer. And the outcomes were similar in that students arrived with lots of questions about what their teachers would be like and what their schools would be like, and by the end of the summer felt more comfortable and confident and had made friends for the upcoming school year. Also, we had some generous donations of books. We actually saw kids reading in English by the end of a 5-week program. And we accomplished that with sort of intentional staffing with regular elementary school teachers, also EL teachers, and then obviously interpreters on site for the majority languages that were present, so that students had that rich experience and could grow as much as possible. So this is a summary slide of some of the results from summer, categorized by sort of the intent of the program. So things we track certainly is, it answers the question of how much, which we highlighted in those gap slides. So we do serve a significant number of students, but there are some gaps. And we also take attendance in many of the programs, with that advancing that theory that if they attend, then they will learn and maintain and grow their skills in the summer. And we don't want to just make sure they show up one day, but how many students are regularly attending, and we currently use 75% as a threshold for that if they attend. So we had on a range of 70 to high to 94% of programs of students that attended 75% or more of that program's time. And then we also, in as many programs as possible, look at what difference did that make? Did they actually maintain their skills or hopefully grow skills over the summer? And for most of the programs, we really look at their spring, where they were at in the spring, and then in the fall, using our typical assessments, and then do a comparison child by child on whether they maintained or grew their skills. An example for elementary literacy would be their reading levels when we look at them in the spring, and then we look at them again in October. So that result for that elementary literacy and STEM programs means that 78% of the students at least maintained the level that they ended with in the year when they were assessed again in the fall. For middle school and high school, you can see that it's more a credit, or standards. Did they acquire credit or make progress on their standards? And then This, some of you may be familiar with this sort of picture of how we accomplish this in the summer, that it is certainly a combination of funding sources that gets us to that over 1,300 student enrollment in the summer. Right now, I don't feel like it's a guarantee that for programming that we can every year confidently move forward and say, yes, we know we can serve 20% or more of the population in the summer to extend their learning and help them maintain or grow their skills. Most at risk in this picture really are our federal funds. You heard Javier allude to the fact that that's a declining pool of money. And then also every year, private grants, it's an ask every year and an unknown. And the timing on private grants really is too late most times for us to do effective planning because we might not receive the announcement of the award till April or May. And by then, we should already have been certainly staffing programs and enrolling students. So this is how we put it all together. I will say this total is a little over $300,000. As you see, does not include transportation costs or food. The goal is to break even due to the federal reimbursements, and some years we do and some years we don't. It also does not include special education programming. That's over and above this picture. And then I didn't mention it in the first slide, but this works out to about $250 a student on average for a summer experience.
Great. So just quickly looking forward with that context in mind, we're hoping to maintain what we currently do, expand it, and strengthen it. And so in terms of maintaining, that means addressing the gap in funding due to the loss of the federal funds. And so we want to be in conversation with you all about that. Expansion, this is where we had the MORE program this year. We did not offer that at King or Lincoln, so our intention would be to expand it to all 3 middle schools. And then same thing with the high school standards program, we want to build that out. We've been doing a traditional credit recovery. We have not revamped that to align to our proficiency standards-based model. So we'd be looking to do that. Also, we know that our one school that's been proficiency-based for the longest, Casco Bay, is a disproportionate user of summer school because their model is one where their students know if they're not meeting standards, they need more time to do it, and they are motivated and required to keep working at it, and that's the kind of culture and approach we're building across the system. So we'd expect both program revision and expansion at the high school level. And then finally, extending the reach at elementary level. Gail's slides at the beginning showed you all the gaps that exist in terms of if about 20-25% of our students needs are being met, that's fewer students than are behind on their proficiency and coming from low-income backgrounds. So that's our expansion kind of goal. And then finally, we also want to be thinking about strengthening quality, in particular program coordination and data reporting systems. There's amazing work happening, as you just heard people speak to. We do, though, think there's work to be done around the program, around aligning the curriculum more coherently with what's happening in the school year. Right now, Molly was amazing, but we've had part-time seasonal staff to come and coordinate the work, so the emphasis and focus has been really at the kind of coordination logistics level with brilliant people like, kind of helping inform and consult where able. But we believe that in order to fully maximize this as an equity lever, as it's indicated in our Portland Promise strategy, that we would need more effort put toward that. And so just looking forward, a little, this is not sharp. I just want to be transparent about that, but we figured you'd be interested in, so approximately what would that take to maintain, expand, and strengthen? And so if we're spending $308 now, again, without the special ed and transportation, if you pull out those grant funds that we're not expecting to receive, that would be $122,000 we're trying to find. And then we made some kind of approximations where if you kind of replicate the middle school, expand the high school to where Casco is, we're looking at about $25K and then $45K at the elementary level. So those numbers are, flexible in terms of, certainly the extending of the reach. It would be more than that, but that was just a ballpark we figured would be useful. And then finally, strengthening the program quality, wanting to point out that we've already made a move on that with the award we received from the Bar Foundation. We're posting this Friday, the Academic Supports and Transition Coordinator, and that will be grant funded. Right now, we're looking at 1 to 2 years, and we'd have to figure out funding streams for that in the long term. But that would enable us to do that kind of programmatic and data look in a way that's much more coherent across the system. So the above amounts total up to about $191,000. So that's it. So we're, everyone's here, including Matt, like I said, to field questions or comments if you all have them.
Just real quick before we get into the questions, I wanted to prompt us just to be aware of our time tonight, and the intention of these presentations is to give us a somewhat high-level overview of these programs. If it's possible to queue your questions to maybe get answers at a later time, or even in some other form, I want us to ask whatever we are interested in learning more about. But again, I want us to keep in line with the intent of these presentations. So having said that, do we have any questions? Ms. Victor, and then Mr. Burke, and Ms. Bondo.
Thank you so much to everyone for this presentation. It's truly impressive how much happens in the summer. The fact that we run 50 programs is kind of mind-boggling, so thank you. My question was about the budget implications. In terms of the loss of, the potential loss of federal funds, can you specify, I have an inkling that that's happening or maybe happening. If you can get into those details, that would be really helpful. And then in terms of the maintain and expand budget scenarios that you put here, or budget implications, does this include, I guess I'm not clear in terms of the gap of students that we aren't serving. Mm-hmm. How much would this, would the expansion serve those students? Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry for trouble articulating my question.
You're asking, would this, with what was proposed here, would that cover every student that could potentially benefit from it?
If you can't answer that, it's fine. But do you do Title I?
Yeah, so the federal funding really is the loss of Title I funds that is, we don't know the exact figure, but we've been told we will lose funds. And usually we would budget within this year's allocation funds for summer school to be able to carry those forward, so they're a guarantee. And those funds aren't there. We didn't have enough money. We had to focus on school year programming, so we don't have that. So that's as much of a certainty as we get to.
And we can do a more detailed presentation on the budget when we have better numbers for the Finance Committee.
And it doesn't fully close the gap to get us there. It is a step towards it. At elementary, an example, we can serve about 15 to 18 students in a classroom, and it increases a classroom at each of 7 sites. So it is a step towards that.
Mr. Burke? Yeah.
I have 3 bright spots that I just want to reflect back, and 2 questions that can certainly come back to me at another time. I just wanted to highlight that I felt my heart swell when I heard the language about how do we create belonging for our students that are transitioning, and I would hope for that in all our classrooms and all our grades, and I hope we can learn from you and what you're creating there. In the Language Academy, the time to connect with oneself, each other, and nature while honoring our differences also made my spirit swell, and I would love to see that be tied throughout the school year for all our students. I wonder about Casco Bay High School's usage, and not only its acclimation to proficiency base, but what how intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, that it may be part of that, also plays into their utilization and what's driving students to participate. Related to that, I'm wondering what the known reasons are why eligible students aren't participating. And I also need clarification, particularly on the $122,000 in order to maintain. I'm just not clear on what's making up those dollars. Thank you.
Yeah, I do think, yeah, and thank you for calling out those specific bright spots. I think it will be helpful, like Superintendent mentioned, to come back to finance and do a little bit more of a detailed look at this. Just high level, the 122 is the federal funds there, the loss of the Title I plus the potential loss of the private grants. So that's how we got that figure. But I think given everybody's interest and our own interest, we want to do a deeper analysis. And so we can together look at what would maintaining look like, what would expansion scenarios look like a little bit, some, a lot. And then I think in terms of the why not participating, I mean, I don't know, Gail, if you have a strong sense. I'll sort of say one thing, and again, that's something we could revisit in curriculum committee. But to the point that we want to strengthen the sort of program quality and data reporting system, it's a bit of a piecemeal heavy lift to pull this off because, like I said, it takes, I mean, Gail's amazing, but this is a portion of her job that hits right when our titles are super heavy, and just the logistical lift to keep running school when most people think school's over is significant. And so we have not had like a real recruitment strategy because funding's been up in the air. We haven't had like somebody who's focused on coordinating it. You know, we're talking often throughout the year, are we going to do it? What's the middle school model going to be? Or do we have time to recruit? You know, some people, you could do it, the other schools couldn't. So I do think that we need a more kind of strategic focus on, you know, figuring out what's at the root of why we aren't reaching all the students. What would it take? How do we do outreach? That should happen, like Ben mentioned, not like right at the end as a scramble, but in an integrated way at parent conferences when we're looking at report cards and all of that stuff. So I think a lot of that would help with why we aren't having the reach that we'd want. And then also we just aren't funding, you know, sort of what it would take to reach all the students who could benefit.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's a mindset shift to standards-based.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Ben was saying mindset shift to standards-based, that idea, you know, in middle school in particular, but across all the grades that, you know, if you didn't get there, it's not over. Like you still, you know, our goal and our intention and our responsibility to you is to still help you make it to the high expectation we know you can meet. Yeah.
Ms. Pondo?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think because we have a time frame, can we proposing if we can move the presentation to the curriculum committee so we can go more deeper to try to analyze some other facts here and some other data. Can we do that? Perfect, thank you. So for that, I just have a question on the, I heard Gail mention about the books, I think the home-based reading, and I heard, and she said, and we mailing books home, and I tried to understand how can we evaluate and add the evaluation and measurement that you do, because if some of those parents, and then you're sending those books at home, and some of those parents, they have a language barriers. So how can you make sure then the language acquisition is well evaluated and measured? How do you do that? It's just around the road when the students are coming back to school, or you have a way to test them, then those books, then we mail at home, really get some results back on the reading process?
I think this is the way it's the FMP data, the spring and the fall, yeah. So we look at individual students, so every student who's in that program, we look at their spring, it's FMP, it's like an assessment for reading level data, and then at their fall. So, I mean, some of this data, and you see that data systems and just our whole approach to that is one of the things we're naming we'd want to strengthen. So it's not that we can draw a direct causation between that program and the maintenance that we saw occur, but it's one of the inputs there. So the way we do it right now is that we look at all the students who were in that program, how they landed in the spring, and then we look at their fall results to look at if they maintained or grew.
Okay. One more last question. On the high school credit, those are the high school credit then the students are earning from the middle school, that means from the 6th and 8th going into high school, or which courses they're getting on the specifically just math or language art, social studies, which area they're earning those credit to the high school standard?
So in was combined data from the freshman connection, which focused on math, and then the high school credit recovery, which covered all content areas. So math or social studies. So that's the number that earned credit as a result of coming back in the summer.
Can I just get the last one to the language? I think that's for Gomez. And I know that when we had some of the language heritage at the East End, and I think that's when we know that when a child learning more than one language is so powerful, so they can blend to a new language. So are you thinking about extending that to the different areas, or just having the French or Arabic, or exposing that one to the other language? Like now we have increase on the Angolese, on the Portuguese. So how can we blend those kind of language heritage and make them strong and holding those kind of programs? Because this is the key measure to try to reduce the achievement gap. So what do you think about that for investing on that?
I'm not sure about the investing specifically around the financial, but philosophically, academically, educationally, research-based, that is something that drives the Language Academy and some of our other programming. And I would love to be able to support more heritage speakers and language programs. And I think summer is a prime time to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Any other questions? Mr. Atkinson?
Sorry, not a question. I just want to say thank you to everybody who gave this presentation and everybody who participates in this really critical work. We know that we have opportunity gaps that exist, and this is just very clearly providing additional opportunities for learning for students. So that's filling in that gap in a very clear way. So I really appreciate all the work that goes into this. Thank you.
Mr. Balfins?
As far as getting into these programs, I know more students are invited in. What is it like with other programs? Are they like that as well, where students are invited in, or is it more spread out, like here's an advertisement locally?
More invitation. Do you want to speak to that, Gail, for elementary?
Sure. It's based on invitation, based on student need. It's really either a program director like Carlos, or a school like an elementary school that's looking at student performance, looking at standards, and then targeting students to receive supplemental support.
Thank you. I guess for me, I was interested in knowing, Mr. Donaldson, you mentioned the change in approach over 2 years ago. What kind of programs were we offering that we decided were not necessarily, like you mentioned, innovative and more personal interest? What kind of programs did we end up sort of kind of bookshelving?
So yeah, I just said I'll be brief. So in summer of 18, what we did is a collaboration across all 3 middle schools, and we partnered with University of Southern Maine, and we were also partnering with Gulf of Maine Research Institute and with the Telling Room to provide a STEM academy and then a humanities academy approach. And so we were really trying to break down a lot of barriers between kids and between schools rather, and get kids onto a college campus, and really push the barrier between summer learning and summer kind of camp experiences and fun stuff. So we're really trying to blend that. And it was a really cool program, but our reach was small. It was really tough to recruit kids and to convince families of what we were trying to pull off. So it was an incredible investment of time and energy and money for a relatively small impact on student achievement. We just didn't see the carryover specifically in kids' academic readiness the following year that we saw from this more targeted approach this past summer. So we went big on the, let's try to do this really cool thing. And it was cool, but didn't have as much impact.
appreciate it, yeah. Appreciate that. My last question/comment is on the title funding. I was trying to scramble real quick to see if I can find it, but earlier last year when we had a presentation on the title funding and we were trying to, I know there was some surveys done about now that we're seeing a loss in title funding, what are we going to prioritize? And we went through that. And off the top of my head, I think I remember us pointing to, this is 2 years ago, a loss of about $230,000 of title money funding for the district. So we're assuming the loss this year will be greater than that.
I mean, well, you can answer, Gail, but I know a lot of you have questions about this, and I think we should do like a very detailed overview with you guys, just because I think it's something you need to understand we are planning to bring to you, and I think that might just be a better, more helpful and productive for us to come back with a real preparation on that.
Absolutely, yeah. Ms. Victor?
Sorry, one last small thing. If it would be great to have a copy of this presentation electronically, if we could add it to board docs.
I think there was an earlier draft attached to board docs, maybe not?
Yeah. It was.
There is one, but I don't know if it's the final.
I just checked, but I probably missed it then. Thank you.
But I know that this has been updated
We
since what I
updated it
had
since we
over the
included it
weekend.
last Thursday.
I know
so
I
we
put
can
it in over the
send you the
weekend,
update,
so.
yeah.
Yeah. But we will update it, Ms. Victor.
Great stuff. All right, so I think we'll finish it up, we'll close it up. Thank you so much for everyone for your work and for the presentation. Obviously, a lot of questions, a lot of interest in this work, so we'll look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next, where's my agenda? Our second board focus on educational issues tonight. It's a presentation from the Parent Engagement Committee reporting to the board and some of the subcommittees' work. Are you going to tee it up for us, Superintendent? All right,
Yep.
you have the floor.
So again, the second board focus session is a report on the work of the Family Engagement Committee. Policy KB was one of the first policies that the board took on when I became superintendent. And the policy was the result of the work that the board had engaged in prior with Portland Empowered. And I know that Councilor Lee, who was on the school board at the time and works for Portland Empowered, was central to that work. And I know that Grace Valenzuela, who is here somewhere, is going to be talking a little bit more about that. Oh, she's right there. Okay. So, you know, I'm so used to like not being able to find you that even when you're right in front of me, I can't find you.
I know you always miss me.
Since 2017, we've worked to reflect the spirit and approach outlined in the policy into the work of the Family Engagement Committee. This truly diverse and representative group of parents and staff have worked tirelessly on a number of important issues over the years, and I know that Grace, if we can find her, is also going to talk to you a little bit about those. And with the support of our Executive Director for Communications and Community Partnerships, Grace Valenzuela, the committee has taken on 3 critical areas for this past year, and tonight they will report out on the work and recommendations for how the district can improve its discipline, attendance, and public engagement efforts. And so with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Valenzuela to introduce the committee and otherwise direct the proceedings. Grace.
Thank you. Good evening. So for the listening public who may not be familiar with the district's policy on school and family partnership, I'd like to highlight some of its key features. The policy was adopted in March 2017. It was based on the work of the Portland Empowered Parent and Family Engagement Manifesto. Board member Bondo was a part of that big work, and it outlines the values and expectations of school-home partnership and requires the district to form a family partnership advisory committee whose purpose is to provide the district input on key district initiatives. Since the committee formation in the fall of 2017, it has advised the district and provided input on the development of a new parent survey, parent university, parent parent-teacher conferences, the survey on the enrollment and facility study, if you remember that work, and input on our ESEA ESSA application, to name just a few issues. Forgot to key my slide. Membership on the committee is specifically addressed in the policy to ensure diversity of voices and representation. And our partnership with Portland Empowered continues to be strong, as some of the parent members of the committee are members of the Portland Empowered Parent Engagement Program. Some of the members of the committee are here with us tonight, and I'd ask for all of them to stand up and be recognized, since they've been here since 6:45. And so if you want to just, say your name.
Lynette Dyer Blake.
Monique Mutumwinka.
Jessica Hathaway.
Maureen Clancy.
Erica King.
Jake Casey.
Amanda Atkinson Lewis. Bert Wilkinson.
Boyd Morley.
And this year, as the superintendent said, the committee work is focused on the district's equity goal, and specifically looked at the issues of discipline, attendance and tardiness, and communications public relations. We formed a subcommittee for each topic to purposely review from an equity angle. And I want to call on Jake Geisman and Erica King, who will present on discipline.
Good evening. So the Family Partnership Advisory Committee identified behavior intervention and management as something of key interest to families, as something that can have outsized impacts on our community, internal and external, and as something that we want to do well and in a way that benefits and partners with our community. So we formed a subcommittee on that topic, including myself, Erica King, Amanda Atkinson Lewis, Maureen Clancy, Barrett Wilkinson, Monique Mutumwinka, Gloria Ponte Clark, Chris Reiger, Edward Lopo, Kay, and I'm probably forgetting somebody else, but most of these people are in the room with us tonight. Erica is going to speak a little bit about what we found when we dug into qualitative and quantitative data.
Great. So you can see the approach that's grounding us as we're looking at impact, and I appreciate the conversation that we've had tonight about the importance of belonging and about opportunity gaps and closing them. I think discipline practices is something that's really important for us to pay attention to and look at the data and the impact and maybe see even some of the unintended consequences of these practices. So we are very lucky to have a data-driven leader here in Jake, who's helped us to mine data, both qualitative data, as Grace mentioned, from Portland Empowered and from other parents that we've heard from, as well as the district's own data. And what's happening in Portland mirrors the trends that are happening nationally across the country. We're no different in the sense that there are racial trends to our discipline gaps. Boys of color and students with IEPs are most likely to be subject to exclusionary disciplinary practices. Right now, what we can track here in Portland is use of suspension, and that's happening mostly to boys of color and students with IEPs. Listening to parents and families, myself as a mother of two boys of color in Portland Public Schools, I think we can all agree that we want accountability. We want high expectations for behavior, but we know from data and from research, whether implicit or explicit, there are biases, there are gaps in this data. And so parents have legitimate concerns about bias, and we want to see a plan to reduce and close these gaps. We want to acknowledge, and I'm speaking in my role as a mother and a parent, that we know that partnering with the district, that teachers and staff need more resources to be able to have timely and effective communications with families. That's been across the board, families' experiences, from whether they find out if there was a disciplinary event at all to whether it happens after the fact and what could happen to prevent. In some places, we have a philosophy of using more restorative discipline practices, and I think we need to look at the impact of these consequences so that we can make sure that they're being fairly and consistently applied, and that we're getting the outcome that we want, and that students are better off and like correcting whatever behavior that's intended to do. And I think we know from research and data and our own experience here that exclusion and practices that push kids out of schools really don't get a good effect. So Jake's going to talk a little bit more about some of our recommendations that we would like to do to measure and have accountability to that and move this forward.
Thanks, Eric. So that's a list of 4 kind of specific problems that we found. So what to do about them? We brainstormed and reviewed a long list of recommendations for action, ultimately settling on these 3 for now. First, internally to Portland Public Schools, we recommend that our district rollout of the Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, or PBIS framework, include a special technical focus on monitoring and intervening in discipline disparities. Some of that is already in place. Secondly, we recommend that administrator professional development include time with panels of Portland Public Schools alumni and alumni parents sharing their experiences with school discipline, good and bad. Some of us have been exposed to some panels like that to great effect. Finally, we have begun to draft a district philosophy statement about suspension, which we would like to vet through a series of stakeholder focus groups and then bring back to Superintendent Baltana's team and perhaps the school committee for review.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maureen Clancy. I'm the Language Access Coordinator for the district, and I help to run the attendance subcommittee. And I had on the team Robin Bailey from Lincoln Middle School, myself, Monique Mutamwinka, parent Francine Nagabu, and Barrett Wilkinson were part of the committee. So the problem we looked at was attending school on time every day, because that's the first step in achieving our goals and having our students meet the goals we set for them. And we looked at average daily attendance and students who missed 17 or more school days, which is considered chronically absent. And that's a number where if students missed that day, many days or more, they basically missed too much work to accomplish the goals set for that year and should be considered for retention. So I also want to note under this that Portland Public Schools does have a compulsory educational policy already in place, and that we are working with Count Me In on a district-wide basis to look at strategies for improving and addressing attendance. So some of our findings. So overall, we have, as a district, a 92.96% average daily attendance rate and an 18.80% chronically absent rate. These rates do change as we move from elementary to middle school to high school. So in elementary school, our average daily attendance is 95.38%, middle school 93.59%, and high school 88.79%. Our chronically absent rate goes from 8.89% in elementary school to 18.9% in middle school to 34.49% in high school. So you can see how that changes over time. We do have significant disparities by race and by other activities. So our Hispanic, Latino, Asian, and students who report 2 or more races are worse in all categories than the district average at elementary, middle, and high school. Our Black and African American students are actually better at all levels than our district average, and our white students are pretty much at the district average at all levels. Our students who have IEPs are worse at all levels. Our students who are English language learners are better on average daily attendance at elementary school, but worse in all other categories. And our economically disadvantaged students are the same on average daily attendance at elementary, but worse on all other categories going forward. So that's how we look as a whole. The schools that have a designated team and specific plan for addressing attendance have better attendance rates, and those that even accounts for, like we looked at schools who are similar, like Reiki, Presumscott, and Riverton, East End, who are our our Title I schools. Reiki particularly is significantly better attendance rates than the other schools, so we looked at what they were doing. And Casco Bay also has a better rates than their peer schools. We also looked at, what came to our minds was middle school. So at 2 miles to get a bus to middle school, we have the furthest distance to get a bus to school than any of our surrounding school neighbors by a half a mile or more. So at 7:45, when our middle school starts, 2 miles is a 30-minute walk, and you add snow and winter and all those activities and distances. I know kids walking from Forest Avenue down by Walton Street all the way to Moore Middle School, which is a really long distance to walk. When you're in 6th grade, maybe different in 8th grade, but 6th grade is one thing. So we looked at those things. So our recommendations were that each school should create a team with a concrete plan written and applied in their schools. The schools that had the best rates had someone in charge, a specific plan, what to do at the first day they're not in school, what to do on the 3rd day, what happens on the 5th day, what happens on the 10th day, and so forth. Specific, concrete plans with people in charge to do that. To determine what is most effective, we need some better data and more consistent data across the district. Tardy data was specifically hard to come across and use to inform our practices, so we need to figure that part out. The district should reduce the mileage for middle school, we believe, to address the middle school issues. We should look at elementary start times. We were hard to find data around this, but there is anecdotal evidence that older students, middle and high school students, are often late because they have to get their younger brothers and sisters to school. And if schools that are sending schools, like Reiki is a particularly late start school, and so the kids going to King or Portland High, if they're tardy, part of the reason could be the support of their younger students at home. We also need to seek more parental input on what parents believe will address and help with attendance issues. And most of our schools have an automatic notification of attendance when somebody misses or isn't in school, but it is not in the family's first language. With 36% of our students speak a second language at home, they're not getting those messages in their first language. So that's something we should address as well. Budget implication, oops, did I not need to do that? Okay, then I'm done. Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Jessica Hathaway. I'm a Rose School mom twice over right now. And first, I just want to say thanks to the board and specifically to Superintendent Botana for supporting this work. I worked on the committee that actually wrote the policy and have carried over the work into this committee. And it's been great to see the evolution under Grace's guidance. So I just want to say thanks for that. So I worked on the Communications and Public Relations Subcommittee, joined by Grace and Nanette Dyer-Blake, Lucia Rico, and Boyd Marley. Grace called in Tim Atkinson to speak to us from the board level about communications and PR work on the board committee as well. So our problem statement was, everyone knows that Portland lands on all these best of lists, which elicits either, groans or excitement, depending on likely how long you've been in Portland. But the schools, on the other hand, don't typically enjoy the same reputation. And so what we looked into was, wait, did I get to the wrong slide here? Okay. Was why exactly is it that, or what are we seeing that supports Portland schools not having as good a reputation as some of the schools in the surrounding communities. One of the things that we found was generally low scores on school rating sites. And actually what we found on those rating sites was that the scores varied widely, and there was no easy way to determine what they were using to reach those scores. Their metrics were sort of all over the place. They may not be updated regularly. And also the comments, the feedback from community members on those sites were pretty old and outdated. A lot of the criticisms were things that aren't relevant to Portland Public Schools anymore. And then anecdotally, we found that families with young children are moving out of the city. So this could be from a variety of factors, including the fact that Portland prices are high for real estate. White flight is certainly a problem in Portland, but also potentially school reputation could be affecting that. So and then also the annual parent survey has a consistently low score across the district in terms of communicating with families. That's parent survey question number 4 that says, this school communicates information and procedures clearly to parents and guardians. And so that was, again, one of the lowest scores of the 9-question survey. And also that the Portland Public Schools website is user-unfriendly, and I can vouch for that as a frequent user of the Portland Public Schools website. It contains a lot of information, and that can be difficult to compile in a useful and easy-to-use way, especially if you are not speaking English as your first language. So on the plus side, we did, determine that Portland Public Schools already uses a wide variety of communication tools and platforms and languages to reach our families and our communities. And also that the district already has a design branding style guide, which we hope to jump off of in our recommendations. So first would be to develop a messaging style guide that will bring the Portland Promise to life. And that essentially would be, your branding style guide for a wider base of community ambassadors, which is our bullet number 2, to create Portland Public Schools Ambassadors Program. And those people would be parents, guardians, grandparents, other community members, and most certainly faculty and staff. I can say as a Portland parent that the Portland Public Schools staff and faculty are your greatest ambassadors already. And it would be really wonderful to see some training for them through a messaging and style guide to talk about what makes Portland Public Schools so great, and to be able to speak in key talking points and to use collateral materials and to reach the broader community with talking about the advantages of Portland Public Schools, because we all know what they are, but the message is not getting out there clearly. So that was point number 4, to develop collateral materials for communication, outreach, and public relations, and that would include cards that you could drop off in all the Portland daycare centers to reach parents of children before they get to pre-K age, to let them know that they're eligible for Portland Public Pre-K and the advantages of Portland Public Schools, and get them at that 4-year range and pull them into the schools, because as Grace has pointed out, once we have them in our schools, they tend not to leave. So there's clearly something there that keeps them there. And then point number 4 would be to launch a new Portland Public Schools website, which Grace says she wants to build from the ground up, so I'll leave that to her.
Not me physically, but. So anyway, there are of course resources needed to attend to the recommendation, and we're thinking that the discipline recommendations are budget neutral, that there may be some staff-related stipend and transportation for the cost for the attendance recommendation, and for the public relation would be the work on the collateral materials, the new website, and the messaging style guide with a consultant. So that's what we have, and but before the last one, I just want to extend my sincere gratitude and appreciation to each member of the Family Partnership Advisory Committee for their time, their dedication, their passion and persistence in ensuring that all voices are heard, that family engagement remains strong and meaningful in Portland Public Schools, and that the district is held accountable to its promise of preparing and empowering our students and families. And by the way, Chair Roberto Rodriguez is also a member of the advisory committee. So.
Yeah, my name was on this. Thank you so much for the presentation, everyone. Guys, if we have questions, we'll sort of kind of keep the same spirit as the other presentation, kind of queue them up. A lot of information in front of us, but please, if anyone has any questions, go for it. Ms. Bondo.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This is amazing. My question is a little large, just a clarification to make sure that everything has a funding. Then we have a funding and recommendation here, especially for discipline and attendance. It's not going in the drawer. Just need to make sure where exactly the district going to be, which area the district will make sure then we have all those funding from parents and the community so we can improve, because this is really something we've been talking about that for years to the community, make sure the discipline and attendance is something we need to make sure then we can have a clear conversation and make some improvement. So I just want to make sure where those documents will go and what we're going to do. Those are the specific people in the district, then they're going to working on the funding and those recommendations for those advisory. And then for the communication, and I think I'm just glad to hear that because I'm chairing the public affair this year, and I think in our schedule and calendar we have the parent ambassador. Then we really think about it, creating. So I think it's gonna be really perfectly the good time to keep talking about it and have some clear conversation. We really can involve parents to be a voice to the district.
Yeah. So on the discipline and attendance, the point person around the discipline is Assistant Superintendent Townsend, and around attendance, it's Assistant Superintendent Nally. But obviously, this is huge work that is not one person, but they are the point people that are working already in these areas, and so they will continue to be the point people in this. And clearly, we think that these are incredibly important recommendations, and they are definitely a part of, the mix in terms of what's happening in those areas.
All right.
Can I add one more thing to that? In the handout, it's not a live link, but there's a link where it says philosophy under the discipline. There's a document on Google Forms, we can probably share it, that has it's like a 2-page document, a philosophy on discipline, and it's a little bit more insight into what Jake and Erica were speaking about. And there's links within that also have some resources, some studies done about the suspension in schools and whatnot. So that's something also we can probably share and kind of add to the insights that we're receiving here. Ms. Figdor?
Yeah, I had a specific question about that, but I think my question could apply to some of the other areas as well. So, for instance, for the work around suspensions, it sounds like that work is still ongoing in terms of developing the philosophy. I'm wondering if the intention is at some point to bring forward a proposed policy for the board to consider around suspensions?
Probably. I mean, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I think there's a ton of work that's happening in that area, and
Yeah, I mean, part of our work plan in the policy committee is the equity review, and I think it's included as part of that in terms of the code of conduct and some of the other discipline policies. So that'll be one of the kind of avenues for us to look at it from a policy perspective.
Great. It seems like there's some really rich overlap here.
Yeah, exactly.
And I hope that we could think about some of this work in terms of policies to make sure that we are, as Ms. Bondo alluded to, really moving the recommendations forward.
And so on, the discipline side, I think we're, slated to take up within the policy committee and would be driven a lot by the feedback from the equity review of those. And I know that on the curriculum committee with Superintendent Nolly, they are looking at the attendance policies as well. So both of those from a policy perspective are slated, as I understand it, in committee work plans for this year.
Great. And I'll just say, as a policy committee chair, that for the folks who have been working on this already, we're going to really want your expertise and involvement. So we'll make sure to reach out to you when we get to those issues and really rely on the work you've already done rather than trying to recreate the wheel ourselves and do so inadequately. So thank you so much for all your work.
That's what I was actually going to say, is that there is the extension of the work could be with the contribution of these folks who really did a lot of work doing their research. And so thank you for that.
Thank you. Mr. Burke?
Just a few comments. Thanks. First of all, thanks for all of this. It's easy to support this, and part of it will be the resourcing. I just want to make a comment on the transportation piece. The average adult human pace is 20 minutes per mile, so a 2-mile radius would be 40 minutes, and it's a 10-minute difference with if it was a mile and a half. And I don't know how that stands up for younger and smaller legs.
I walk 15-minute miles.
Okay, great. Then for the public relations, just an idea that I regularly pitch, and people say that would be a great idea, but somebody needs to do something with it, is like a little welcome package for people that are new, whether they've bought a house or they're renting, and that's the idea. Thanks.
It's actually one of our plans in the details of our work, yes.
Somebody is doing something about it.
We're on it, we need resources.
Any other questions? Mr. Atkinson?
Yeah, just a quick question on the discipline area. I was wondering if there were any bright spots in the data. I know that these racial disparities in the suspensions and discipline exist, but I'm wondering if there are any schools or any areas where those are less, and if there are strategies that are being employed that are effective at reducing the gaps.
As Erica said, most of the useful data is about suspension, although at some schools we've been able to look more deeply at all kinds of discipline. The one thing that stands out in my memory, recently we were presented from Assistant Superintendent Townsend suspension data, and I believe that Deering High School really didn't have a black-white suspension gap. I don't know if we've gone
And I think the
further.
board has seen those data as well, so I think that is one of the highlights. They did have a very significant disparity in between students who are economically disadvantaged and non-economically disadvantaged. So I don't think that there are any bright spots when you're talking about disparities, and I think across all of our schools we see them. We do see, trends that are moving in the right direction and things along those lines. And one of the things that I think the board knows, but I want to reiterate for the board and for for the public, is that we are now getting to a place where we actually have these data, and this is the work that Mustafa Rastampur and his data team have been helping to lead to really get ourselves into a place where we're able to look at what we think is reliable data about our discipline practices. And I think that that's something that we've been anxious to have. Assistant Superintendent Townsend has brought a great lens to actually using that data. We have great practices and people who are deeply committed to equitable discipline in our schools. And so I do think that we have the right people in place and a real disposition to be able to do something about it. Whether it leads to policy or not, the reason I say probably, because it probably will, but, it's less about, it may be that the policy isn't the problem, that it's the implicit biases, the practices in schools and things along those lines that play into those. And so, I definitely think that we need to look at the policy angle, but I do think that we have the right, we're getting to a place where we have the right data, we have the right ways of looking at those data, and we are in a much better place to actually impact this. And we see now some trends that are moving in the right direction.
Mr. Burke?
Just one additional resource to bring to your attention in relation to ambassadors is now Mayor Snyder's Maine Live Talk from almost 5 years ago, when she unpacked the misconceptions and rumors that which perpetuate untruths about our schools and portraying them in a better light, and how we can all participate in that. So there's a great asset out on Vimeo already.
Any other questions? Do you guys have any questions? I had just a couple of quick questions. I guess first on the discipline. So one of the things I came across in my own research is, and I guess this is not necessarily news, but that we see almost the same students that were suspended in elementary schools get suspended in middle school, get suspended in high school. Did our data support that? Like, are we suspending the same kids throughout all three levels?
I don't think we know that.
No.
Maybe Erica does.
Jake said he can't speak to that, but I will say in my parent role, what has been hard and what I'd love to see more of in a bright spot is when we're tracking all of the informal exclusionary disciplinary practices leading up to suspension. So a suspension is what you can measure, but what we're not capturing consistently across the board, and what we really need to capture at elementary, middle, and high school level, and some schools are doing this, so I would say that's a bright spot, is all of the practices that lead to that. The go to the principal's office, the detentions, the withholding of a recess, the practices that start pushing someone out of a classroom, ironically the same students that we have learning gaps with. So I think we need, the bright spots are we have some better data capacity around actual implementation of PBIS and its impact, but we need more.
Yeah.
And it can't just rely on suspension as the only data point, but it's the best and most reliable one we have, it sounds like.
Yeah, because like a suspension starts with a referral, right? Like this teacher says, you need to go to the office or
But I
something.
can't speak to the trend.
Aaron, I'm sorry.
No, just I think following up on that, that a big piece of the PBIS implementation is capturing data and the implementation on the front end of some of those pre-suspension disciplinary measures. And so there are a few different practices in play in terms of the way schools do that. But that's been a huge growth and is part of the focus of the Tier 1 implementation in schools moving forward in the development of their PBIS practices, that data piece. And then I think on the suspension side, and this, obviously I'm the one of the newer guys on the block, right? Yeah. All right, newest. But asserting this year, we began the year asserting just an expectation, which in my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, other district historians, of like all suspension data needs to be captured in Infinite Campus. And that wasn't, we began that way because that was not necessarily the clear understanding. So just to the point of being able to track over time from a student from elementary up to high school, the historical data that's existed in our system is not there. And so we've been clear, and again, again, much credit to Jamie Kearney on the data team, the data manager, and Mustafa's team to be able to create those conditions, asserting that in our school leaders of taking up that practice. And so to support that, we're doing a mid-year kind of audit, so sending back out to everybody, this is the data we have, so that in an ongoing way, we're reviewing, okay, this is the data we have. Was this your reality? Are there duplicates? Are we missing things? So that we get good quality data so we can move this work forward, because you can't move any of this forward without that.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for that. I think that that's key, and what Erica said is key too, because even if we, quote unquote, stop the suspensions, then what we would have in lieu of suspensions, like, in the philosophy of discipline document, it says, like, instead of suspending, we would do, like, problem-solving contracting, restitution, mini courses, modules, in-school suspensions, and all of a sudden we'd be packing those, substitutes for suspensions with the same demographics, which is obviously still inequitable. So yeah, I appreciate the from start to finish kind of look at this, at the discipline work. Another question on the attendance. So first of all, how do we define chronically?
17 or more days. 17
or more, thank you.
Yeah, which is 10%, or more of the school days.
Cool beans. So in your data point here, or your comment here, students who miss more than 17 school days in a given year, missing enough instruction to be considered for retention. When a kid misses school, what happens when he's back, like the next day or however long he's gone? What do we do to help them get caught up? Or is it up to them?
I think it depends probably at different grade levels.
And the level, yeah, and the school, I'm assuming, yeah.
And the teacher.
I won't get too far into this.
No, and I wasn't asking for details, but I guess it's...
But I think it's something that, I was on the communication team, but we do have, like, first off, Boyd Morley, Principal at East End.
Everybody knows
Happy New Year, everybody. But no, I think that's something, just like all these pieces as far as we're looking at, and I'm so glad that Assistant Superintendent Townsend talked about the PBIS piece, because I think that's a huge data point that Erica brought up that will help us. But the same thing with getting data around attendance, so that we can see the kids that are chronically absent, are their times, are their patterns, are they missing certain classes. I think at the elementary level, it's different than at the middle school level, where I could be coming in late because tardies are a piece of that absence piece. So am I missing math chronically? Then there should be an intervention piece there. But I think it all goes back to data, figuring out, quantifying what it is, what the need is, and then either the interventions or hopefully putting in some sort of pieces that will help the child get to school, help their family get in school, and access their education. So it's not a direct answer, but I think that's what we need to do, and it all going back to getting the right data.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of like this kind of repeated kind of answer, like the data is just not sufficient at this point, but I'm glad that, at least since
and if I can just echo something that the superintendent said as far as, and you asked, Mr. Atkinson, is around the bright spot. I think the bright spot for the district, I'd say from an administrative point of view, is the work that we have done on PBIS. But the other work is, and I don't want to lose sight of it as far as on equity, because while I don't necessarily think the numbers are there and we're seeing that, I think the trends are there, and I think the mindsets of the adults who are making the decisions, we did work at the beginning of the year on the opportunity myth, and it's really around adult decisions and how it impacts children. So I think the equity work that we've done as a district is probably one of the more profound, impactful things that we've done professionally that is moving us in the right direction, if I can just echo that. All right?
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If I can name one other quick bright spot, is that East End has reduced their chronic absence rate by more than half at this point this year compared to this point last year. So another bright spot.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. I guess my last point is I also want to just jump on board. The PPS website is pretty horrible bandwagon. So I leaned over to the superintendent. I said, I wonder if there's a way that we could figure out what is it that people are using the website for. And of course there is, because when you click, there's like a yeah. So and superintendent quickly said the majority of the people that are visiting the website are looking at the calendar. They're looking at what's happening.
And the food service menu.
And the menus.
That's what's for lunch.
Good. So clearly that's all we need. We need 2 pages.
So I just want to say one more quick thing. I run across this in my role professionally, but I think one critical component of analytics to look at is how people are looking at your website, and if they're looking at it mostly through mobile, you might consider designing the website primarily for mobile first and then for desktop secondarily.
Do we have those analytics?
Oh, I'm sure we.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you do.
Good stuff. Again, so I guess if there's no other questions, I'll once again thank everybody for your work. The Family Partnership Committee is, is one of the things that I enjoy the most. I try to report on it when we have our committee work here. I'm looking at Councilor Ali behind you because, as his work, you, sir, right here. You missed it. I joked on you earlier tonight, and you weren't here to laugh with me about it. You were instrumental in with Portland Empowered and sharing with us the Parent Manifesto, which was the basis for our policy. It clearly has driven this school board to capture some really important information and the need to gather more data so we can create the district that we think we need to create. So again, thank you everybody for your work, and anything else that we can do to support it, we're here for it.
Can I just sort of piggyback on that? I think this is the group, you heard from Jessica that she was a part of the committee that drafted the policy. Boyd was a part of the committee. Maureen was a part of the committee. So, others, I think Edward, who is still on the committee, was part of that. So there's a significant carryover of people that have been engaged in this work since 2017. And, then there's a huge number of new folks that have also come in with tremendous passion and energy. And I think that, when Board Member Figdor commented earlier on the fact that, our BLAC appointments do not reflect the community, I think that that's, fair and absolutely true. And I also think that, there was deliberate work that went into creating this committee the way that it is, and that, that's the deliberate work that actually, yields a long-term investment and engagement from, a cross-section of the community that otherwise might not come together. So there's clearly lessons here beyond the great lessons that they taught today about these particular issues in just the way that we organize ourselves and how we do the work. So, so just thank you to everyone, because I know you guys get up super early for those meetings. I sometimes join you in my pajamas. And
Can I? I'm so sorry. One more thing. I want to piggyback on that one. And to Ms. Victor's point, if there is one committee that I've joined as part of this board whose membership does represent the demographics of this district, that's the committee. I'm telling you that you walk in there and you see everybody that's sitting on that table, and you see Portland Public Schools. So great job. And is Grace Valenzuela here? Oh, there she is. Thank you, Grace, so much for your work and leading this work. Good night, everybody. Appreciate it. Our agenda is not over yet, by the way. You're on, board members.
Yeah.
All right, we have one more new business item tonight. It's a first read pursuant to Section 2307 and 1485, subsection 4 of Title 20-A, to authorize the superintendent of schools to transfer from available funds budgeted for the FY 2019 fiscal year operating budget no more than 5% of the total appropriation for any cost center to another cost center or among other cost centers of FY 2019 fiscal year operating budget, provided that the total FY 2019 fiscal year operating budget shall not be increased by such transfers. The superintendent shall provide written communication at the time such authority is exercised. And there are no comments on first reads. Next, personnel items. Let's start it. Consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed. 1 year only teachers. Is Barb started? Are you going to speak on the item, please? Motion.
Hey, everybody.
I'm sorry.
We have.
I'm so sorry. I think we need a motion first. Is there a motion? Mr. Atkinson, second by Ms. Victor. Sorry, interrupt.
No problem. Tonight we have 2 one-year-onlys that we're looking for your approval on.
Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, there's no public comment on personnel items or any board discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the personnel items listed, 1 year only teachers, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting in favor as well.
Is the controller on here?
Next one.
What's that?
Next meeting.
Okay, got it.
Next, given that it's before the hour of 10 o'clock, is there any public comment on items not in this evening's agenda? And seeing none, we'll close the public comments. Before we adjourn, just want to let the public know we are going to have a workshop immediately after this meeting to discuss the board meeting and committee schedule for the 2020 year. And that will not be televised. Is there a motion to adjourn the business meeting? Mr. Atkinson, second by Ms. Bondo. All those in favor, please indicate. That's unanimous with the students voting in favor. We've adjourned at 9:18 p.m. Thank you.